Representations of women experiencing the kinds of maladies described in the previous videos would maybe look a little bit like this. In both pictures, you see things that are just out of place and disruptive. So, on the left-hand side, this woman's shoes are clearly too small for her. Open-toed shoe, not maybe the best vantage point or the best option for the setting that she's in on some kind of windy, stormy crag on the outskirts of society. She's dressed in these rags with this kind of bizarre hat with a clear sense of just sadness in her expression. The woman on the right, much more terrifyingly so, not wearing shoes, has kind of these talons here with a wide-eyed look and kind of this menacing swoop of her cape suggesting something bestial and primordial. So these images of sort of the hysterical woman are, of course, stereotypical visions of an overflow of emotion that would have been characterized by this kind of mania that's being described in the article that we're looking through. So Showalter, as she continues to describe her piece, looks at Ophelia as kind of like a representation for a cultural vision of woman, meaning if you could go back and look at how Ophelia was represented on the stage in the early 19th century, the middle 19th century, you would get a sense of an entire culture's view of women through those performances. So the first one that she looks at, after kind of addressing the Elizabethan era, is what she calls the Augustine era, which is early 19th century. She says the Augustan objectives to the levity and indecency of Ophelia's language and behavior led to censorship of the part. Her lines were frequently cut, and the role was often assigned to a singer instead of an actress. This is an interesting vision of kind of I guess a priggish morality that looks at Ophelia and says she's indecent. We shouldn't be seeing her in this stage of hysteria. And so rather than look at her, we should just hear her, or she should be like a tone or a song that kind of serves as a backdrop for the more important things happening in the play. So to reduce her and cut her as a character has significant implications. Moving into the middle of the 19th century, Romanticism, with its emphasis on emotion, sees Ophelia as a girl who feels too much, who drowns in feeling, and the Romantics love feeling. So that became just an object of aesthetic contemplation, which is kind of what Claudius says about Ophelia in Act 4, Scene 5. Claudius watches Ophelia here in her in this mental breakdown that she's having and says, "Poor Ophelia, divided from herself and her fair judgment, without the which we are pictures or mere beasts." Two startlingly inhumane ways of looking at Ophelia, that on the one hand, she's either just something pretty to look at, just an interesting picture here that has no kind of reason to it anymore, or she's just been reduced to something that is merely bestial. So Claudius views Ophelia, maybe perhaps, and the Romantics certainly did, as just an object of art, which in and of itself is kind of nothing or no thing, as Hamlet says to Ophelia. That she, again, in her personhood and in her humanity, is not being assessed. Instead, she's just being viewed as something that can create emotion for us, or we can use her to experience a similar kind of emotion. So in the next couple slides, we'll look at some of the artistic representations of Ophelia to talk about what it looks like to view her situation, certainly by the end of Act 4, through the lens of kind of aesthetics.